Calling all Marine Corps spouses. Looking for real talk on Marine Corps life? Tune in to Behind the Camouflage, the podcast that connects, inspires, and empowers our Marine Corps family. From career advice to personal stories, we've got you covered. Find us wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hey, Scuttlebutt listeners. This is episode 179. This week, the long road takes us across the Overseas Highway with SgtMaj Justin LeHew. For those unaware, the Overseas Highway is the 113-mile span of highway and bridges that connects the Florida Keys to mainland Florida. In his endless pursuit of veteran advocacy, SgtMaj stepped off on the 23rd anniversary of September 11th to continue to not only raise awareness for veterans and those POW MIAs who have yet to come home, but to also raise awareness for the significance of the Florida Keys, and specifically the Overseas Highway, to our nation's history and the role veterans played in its construction. As with all Justin LeHew-related activities, this is a fascinating discussion on the little-known history of this unique region. Here is episode 179. Hey, Scuttlebutt listeners, thank you for joining us. I'm Vic. I'm here with Nancy.
Hey, Vic. Hey, everyone.
And we're here with SgtMaj LeHew.
Hello.
Hey. So I think part of the deal is we're official that when you do a walkabout, you just add a few extra miles onto your estimated totals so that you can walk up here and tell us all about it.
Yeah, usually works out that way.
Yeah, that's right. So, so for those listeners who've been living under a rock, or for our esteemed fans who've been tuning in, SgtMaj Justin LeHew does this unbelievable advocacy, charity work on what he calls the long road, and to bring awareness to veteran issues, everything from the genesis of why don't you have your POW MIA flag up over a post office has now led into what can we continue to do to recognize veterans, veteran challenges, veteran advocacy, and what parts of the United States haven't we seen and need to know? Did I kind of sum it up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Also, with History Flight, again, going and bringing our boys home, mainly in the Pacific. I think last time you were on, we talked about some of the issues with Chinese influence on some of these islands within the second and third island chains. Anyways, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me again, Vic.
Yeah, and so you just finished a walk. Could you tell us a little about it?
Yeah, it was started on September 11th. This had been the third iteration since 2022, where my good friend, retired Sergeant Major Rocky Kinzer, and I, this time we had a third Marine, our first year in 2022, Staff Sergeant Ray Sheenahara, and Ray had some life things that he couldn't participate on this one. But each year, roughly about the time that the National POW MIA Day is for America, which is always the third Friday of September, it falls in, we've definitely chosen a place to kind of go out and continue in a shorter segment, building on what we did in 2022 with the walk across the United States for that mission and other veterans' causes. This year, we chose the Florida Keys, and we chose the Florida Keys for a multitude of reasons. One, it's normally comes up in conversations when we're out walking, and it's like, where has somebody been and where has somebody not been, or these stories come up, and you're like, wow, this is really neat. And then you start going over veterans' highways and what's named after certain things, and the Florida Keys kind of popped up. Is one, it is all-inclusive, meaning when you dip into the Florida Keys on the Overseas Highway, it is its own highway. And you're not competing with 5 or 6 other fragmented highways. You only have one. Once it drops below Homestead, Florida, you're in the Florida Keys. And the other thing is, usually every time someone in their life has always either wanted to go or has been, that's on their bucket list. They want to go see the Florida Keys. So having been there numerous times and also understanding a little bit more of it's not just this really neat highway where vacationers speed from Miami to try to get on the weekend to party all they can in Key West. A majority of people just has no idea, one, how the highway was built, and then secondly is who built the highway, and then thirdly is how much of a military influence and strategic purpose the Florida Keys has in the collective defense of the United States of America, because the U.S. military is dispersed all through the Florida Keys, all through the Florida Keys.
Yeah.
The thing with the Florida Keys, unlike other places, is you don't know the U.S. military is dispersed all through the Florida Keys because it's hidden in plain sight. It's not advertised with big welcome to Fort Victory or any of these things. They are collectively tucked into every little hamlet all the way along that 113-mile stretch. And the thing that's the closest that you may see is a Coast Guard helicopter constantly cruising up and down for interdiction or for life-saving or for the multitude of services that they have going on. It is a point of contention for decades in the United States. And that predates the Civil War, from when people strategically started using that as a coaling station in the South when it was the Confederate States of America. And most people don't know Mallory Square. That's this famous go watch the sunset in America to do that. That's technically the Southern Secretary of War during the Civil War is Mallory, and that's who that's named after. And
Okay, I didn't know that either.
Yep, and that is right there, no matter where you're at. And then the U.S. Navy over the years, using that as a coaling station, all the way through the Spanish-American War, and then you start to find, it comes on the map roughly about the time that the USS Maine blew up in Havana Harbor in 1898. And then that's in the news all through America. I can even remember growing up in the farm fields of Ohio, and even as a kid, you knew what the USS Maine was, because a fragment or a piece of the Maine seemed to be, wherever you traveled in America, somebody had a piece of this ship on display, or somebody had something in their living room that had Admiral Dewey on it, or it made you question, what's the significance of that? And when you found out that was the catalyst for American involvement to get into the Spanish-American War, and you're in the study of warfare, you find out there's always a catalyst that propels America into certain things. Whether the truth is the truth on how it happens, regardless, that was a big deal. In 1898, that was a huge deal because the Maine operated all throughout the Florida Keys. And then that's where still a lot of sailors are buried. They were brought to the Keys. Still, sailors from the Maine are buried in Havana, in Cuba. And you find out, well, not only is that there, then you find out what a strategic impact that was in 1902 during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
It was the front line of the Cold War.
Oh, my Lord. I mean, you see the black and white photographs in that time period that show missile batteries all through the Florida Keys aimed at Cuba. And people are still swimming on the beaches and everything else because this is going to happen. But one of the bigger impacts that no one had known, and it was one of the main reasons to pick that, not only is it a beautiful, scenic thing, Marines in general have a huge play in the expansion of Florida. They have a huge play all the way back to our history when, the theory of Commandant Archibald Henderson supposedly tacking a thing to his house to his wife saying, gone to fight the Indians, I'll be back when the war is over, and then starts the incursion down into Florida. And we kind of all know over the years, then the industrials take over. Then you start to get into, General Butler, war is a racket, and you're starting to look at tying the Marine Corps to expansionary things, and you're starting to put all these puzzle pieces together, but the Marine Corps has their finger on the pulse of all of this. And so it was really easy to select that during that time period, which, thank God, we selected it about a couple of weeks ahead.
My
Your timing
goodness.
was perfect.
Unbelievable.
Timing was
I mean, a couple of weeks is. You were talking. It seemed like days from when you got back to when.
And we started seeing the hurricane efforts
Yeah.
when we wrapped up the long road from September 11th to September 20th, when we ended in the cemetery in Key West at the USS Maine Memorial that was down there. Our drive back to Virginia, where Rocky was going to fly back to Hawaii, we already at that time started figuring out, without hearing the news, something is going on and we need to pay attention, because all of the power and electric trucks were heading south on the I-95 through Georgia, through everything. Right? And this is before anything has happened in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
This is before any of the back-to-back hurricanes are starting to hit down there. And you're starting to, normally if there's a hurricane alert in the Keys, they will shut down all the inbound lanes, make everybody, that had not happened yet. So people's lives were just still going on.
Mm-hmm.
But someone had known this may be a little bit bigger, that we're going to start sending this stuff, and Florida has requested all this stuff to start coming south to be pre-staged. And we started to see thousands of little caravans of trucks and supplies, power line trucks, 10 or 12 coming from Pennsylvania. They're driving south. And that made you start paying attention more to what's going on. And you turn on the weather and it's like, holy cow. This is within a couple of days of evacuation orders are already starting to happen. And so that tied into one of the most major things of selecting that is one of the neatest highways in America that ends at mile marker 0. But that highway is built on what was a railway expansion to the Floridas, and that's how it became the Overseas Highway by a man named Henry Flagler.
Flagler, right.
And they used to call it Flagler's Folly. This guy's just throwing money. Who's going to build, who's a lunatic to build a highway over water? And he creates these bridging systems and connects these keys and ends up creating a railway that runs all the way down to Key West. Knowing the humidity and everything else at times, that had to be miserable. Mm-hmm. Right. Whether you're putting blocks of ice in that for your high-paying customers to get some kind of pseudo air conditioning, it gets pretty sweltering hot and miserable down in Florida.
Yes, it does.
Tying into the long road theme of you select things that are hard. That's beautiful, but days down there were hard because you're starting to talk about 100 degrees with 100% humidity. And then what you kind of failed to factor in is when you're walking on the pavement, the heat from the pavement that's reflecting up is cooking you like a slow-boiled egg a lot of times. And we didn't have that in 2022 a long way across America. We knew the humidity was coming. We knew the heat. But for the first few days, you were just wondering how you're not walking anywhere near the miles you were walking across America. And we were putting in 25, 27 miles out there. You're only walking 8 to 10, but your energy is zapped, and you're baking. You cannot cool down no matter what you're drinking. And that is the factor of the heat coming off of that pavement. There's nowhere to go. Yeah. You're getting the humidity layered on top of you. And even on your brake, if you step off to the side of the road, this heat's coming up from the pavement. So in September 2nd of 1925, ironically, the greatest hurricane to ever hit America hit the Florida Keys. And off Matacumbe Key, it wiped out hundreds of people that were down there helping to build the Overseas Highway, which was President Roosevelt's work project program to employ veterans and get people. So a lot of people in the Florida Keys that were shuttled down there to work on that highway were veterans, hundreds of them. And they set up these little camps through the Keys. And it kind of was very reminiscent of when you would watch how they used to build the railroads. They they're laying these ties and they're laying this stuff, and then you build a camp here, and then tomorrow we build a little bit more and more. That's what they were doing through the Florida Keys. And then this hurricane came in September of 1935. These veterans that were in the Keys were part of what was called the Bonus Army in America. And they were a majority of World War I veterans who were promised bonus money for serving in World War I, but the government never kept delaying this payment more and more. Well, then the stock market crashes, the Great Depression starts happening, and the veterans are now getting an army together to start marching, demanding their benefits for serving the nation back then. A lot of the catalyst of those is what propels FDR to start making these decisions on, we can't pay this or whatever we're doing here, but let's start trying to get people to work for a wage, and we start getting the WPA, the CCC, and he employs all these veterans, puts them down to build that highway, and they can't get them out. So the greatest Cat 5 hurricane in history wiped through the middle of the Florida Keys, and one of the saddest things in Isla Mirada, they have a very beautiful memorial to the hurricane victims of 1935.
Oh, wow. I've never seen that.
And in front of it is a sarcophagus, because at the time when they're starting to also, after this hurricane rips through, and at the time, Flagler's company and the railroads did try to push some trains down to get them out, but they could not get through to get these men off of those islands. So they had to ride out this hurricane in shanties. There was nothing to even hang on to down there.
That's crazy.
So behind this memorial, which I would hope that people, when they stop and they look at it, are these coral platforms to have these black granite panels that tell the story of all of this. And what it is one gigantic map that said for X amount of months and years after that, where these bodies all through the Florida Keys kept showing up at.
Oh, geez.
Wow.
Right? And these are missing in action veterans, and they're still MIAs from those veterans that had never been recovered.
Wow.
They're either swept out to sea,
Sure.
but more importantly is they were swept onto these keys, these islands, impaled in trees. The cleanup's got to be insane. It's in the humidity. It's in this worst part of the year. So they build these Viking funeral pyres down there, and they start cremating the bodies that they find. And there's photos of these camps set up with these logs all piled up, and it looks like they're placing bodies on top of those. And these are these bonus marchers that were just trying to make a living after serving their country.
Yeah.
That were killed during the greatest hurricane that ever hit the United States. And it was, to me, it's like no one ever knew that.
Yeah.
Not only did they die once, it's like they died twice, because no one even remembers the sacrifice at all.
Right.
And a lot of times the POWMIA flag is very indicative of the overseas sacrifice of America. But we have so much within our own borders, whether it's training accidents, everything else doing this, or just people disappearing within our own borders. And hundreds got wiped out. So the cremated remains then go to be part of that memorial. So in front of the memorial, it looks like a big coral sarcophagus. And civilian and veterans, the remains were all placed inside of that. So they are built into that memorial.
Wow.
That's sitting there, with the story of very intricate detailed on day 17 after the hurricane. This body was found, 22 miles out here by this fisherman or whatever. And you can just imagine the mass chaos that is going down there to build and sacrifice this vacation spot that everybody knows that we're going to take our families down to. And for that military influence, for all of that, there's not even a lot of military people that know, as soon as they go below Homestead, what used to be Air Force Base, and you were driving that 113 miles through the Keys, the service and sacrifice on that 113-mile stretch of highway, I would put that 113 miles of service and sacrifice against any highway segment in the United States. to say that veterans impacted the building. That reflects the service and sacrifice that we are talking about for who Americans are. And most people just drive past every marker. I got to get to Key West. They don't stop to see any of this. And the best thing was when we were out there walking, and I am telling the story even to the mayor of Key West and everything else, they start sending me things and photos of even local people now going out to read the memorials.
Oh,
and,
nice.
Oh, that's awesome.
and
Good.
they have lived there and didn't know what that was, or didn't know the tie-in to care enough to walk over there and actually read what that old thing. And now on top of that, she says that they're even coming out with like Brasso and everything else
To clean it
to
up.
start cleaning it up
Nice.
out of respect. And I've always found that since I started doing this years ago, is like the Indian chief of the village. You know, you can read about things, but the voice and interaction is the most inspirational thing to get someone to believe. It's not TED Talks online. It's personal interaction to when you can hear the rise and inflection of people's voices and the care and concern, or the why. Why does this person believe in that, or why do you not believe in that? Those interactions feed that. And so when you can personally interact with people, I found out that the more that you can do that initially up front, it makes your life easier down the road, because then they start interacting with other people and they start putting the fluoride in the water, and it's not you constantly telling the story. And if I would put this on the internet, the majority of people would not listen to it, right? But if we put this on the internet, now tied to all the people that I met in Florida, they're going to tune into the podcast, and they're going to start circulating this podcast throughout their own little networks. And then that in tune serves its purpose for how we best help veterans.
Yeah.
Well, so going into this walk, you came to visit with us before you stepped off, and we talked about some of the other challenges that were unique to walking across basically a long bridge. So you had to make certain time and mile markers at the end of each day, because it's not like you could just get your sleeping bags out and sleep on a bridge that
That's exactly
night.
right.
So how did you manage those very unique challenges?
Those segments, we would sit down as we were talking, and we were experiencing segments from Key Largo. So when you start in Key Largo being the northernmost key, it's an extension of Florida that really doesn't look like Key Largo. Looks different than Key West does. By the time that you get there, it looks drastically different. This is more industrial up here to do that. It's tied more into America. It's like the northern keys, and then the center keys, and then the southern keys. So your road systems are different up there. Your access points are a lot different. There's more shade. There's more businesses and opportunities to hydrate along the way. And
more traffic then. Huh?
And there's more traffic up there, right? So you're really getting into multiple things of traffic, where that was some of the most distracted driving I'd ever seen in America, was up in the northern part of the Keys.
Wow.
Because everybody's trying to get to and from somewhere, and it's on the same height. They're all bleeding into one highway.
And just to clarify, you don't have like an escort, right? You don't have a car with flashing lights.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, you're just there.
So what ties into the 2022 and 2023 is, once again, you're wired all the time, because you have to stay alert all the time. If you're walking on any roadway in America, you really don't get caught dazing off too long, because in today's day and age, you got to watch for the vehicle that's going to swerve, because American roadways were not made for walking. They're just not made. That's not what they were created for. And there is a reason out there when you go to REI. If you go to REI, for example, REI, you can get maps, books, everything about whatever REI you have in your region. Like if you go into an REI around here in Virginia, you're going to get anything you want to know about the Appalachian Trail, Skyline Drive, and the national parks that are around here. And then if you ask, they have other things around America if you're going to go from somewhere else, right? Not a single one of those things are advising anybody to use the roadways to hike
Right.
across America, right? So even the hiking community is always absolutely fascinated with this, that someone would do this, because everybody wants to walk the Appalachian Trail, or
Yeah.
everybody wants to walk the PCT or something, it doesn't matter, the Camino, these life things that are here. And you get tens of thousands of people, that's their bucket list. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this. You rarely get a single human being, this is my bucket list, is to walk 1,000 miles across Nebraska or walk out like that. And I also found that very fascinating myself too, because the American roadway system connects America.
Yeah.
And it connects those small towns. And if you do it safely, there is a way to see some of these really great things that even communities that profess they are this community, they aren't even involved in trying to do those kind of. And in 2024, I found that fascinating, because you're thinking by this time everything's been tried and it's all been done. Everybody's got their thing, or we've explored the moon, or we've been here or there. And you're finding this one great thing in America that basically nobody is doing. And it isn't they're homeless. It isn't this. There's walking with a purpose. And that purpose tied to this across these segments gets to show the service and sacrifice to the 99%. Because even in the military, the bad part about writing leadership books in the military, detailing about military leadership, is that appeals to about 2 to 3% of the population that has a connection to the military.
Yeah.
The other 97% look at that like, well, I've never been in the military, so what do they have to teach me?
Mm-hmm.
They don't put 2 and 2 together,
Right.
because you're marketing to a very niche market and opportunity. That's why Simon Sinek is Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek took what we have done. Leaders Eat Last, starts with why. A lot of influence by the U.S. Marine Corps on that thought process, right? But instead of just marketing leadership, he took military concepts and civilianized them to make everybody understand that there's applicability in both communities and connecting files. And so, like, It Starts With Why is one of the greatest leadership books in the world, with military concepts rolled into it. But it's delivered to the 99% rather than targeted at the 1%. And that's where change happens. That is where change happens when you have people that market books in the military. They're marketing books to 1% of the population that may or may not read that, rather than writing that book for the 99th percentile with a flavor that goes on top of it, which then becomes a greater catalyst for change than you just putting a story out to 1% of the population that may be interested in that. That's what we tried to apply that with the long road. We didn't want it to be, it's a couple of sergeant majors. We have nothing to connect with the military, so we shouldn't pay any interest in this. It gave people the 99% the why. Mm-hmm. It gave people the why because you were tying in the American story at the same time that you're giving a military flavor, but you're not beating people over the head with one thing or the other. And we found on this walk, more people came out of the woodwork earlier on than it took the other ones, because the fluoride in the water from 2022.
Yeah, you built on that momentum.
It has. And now the word has, oh, you're those guys. Oh, you're that guy. Oh, we need to introduce you to this person. And we found the support faster on this than it took 2 to 3 months in 2022 to start generating a little momentum. This momentum started at a firehouse before we even stepped off. Oh my God, you're those guys. And the firefighters on 9/11 are coming to the firehouse before they have to do their things because they want to meet you, right? And then, are you going to walk past our firehouse that's down here? So the support kicks in faster. And once the support kicks in faster, Vic, that tied into what you were saying, is that means you don't have to be driving a vehicle with a bunch of red lights saying don't do this.
Yeah.
The population starts doing this for you. And that's an amazing thing to see.
And I noticed, I'm sorry, Vic, I interrupted. I was just going to say, I noticed from following the Facebook group that you had a lot of involvement from the active duty community.
Yes.
A lot of support.
Absolutely.
Which was great.
And that's a byproduct of a 2 or 3 year investment and consistency. Consistency in messaging, I found out, matters, because without consistency in messaging, people want to know, are these one-offs, or is there a bigger theme that's tied in? And when you build a theme, and the thing I've probably learned over the past 2 to 3 years is consistency. Messaging is only good so far if you don't identify what the marketing aspect is of any of that. And in 2022, marketing punted that in the stands because there's no marketing up front. It took 2 to 3 states to get some generated.
Just talking to us.
Yeah, we really did. And it really was sitting out there like, I think we're just going to start walking across. It really was this novel concept. And now, each time that I finish something like this, it's almost like the first thing that people ask you is, so what are you going to do next? Right? And you're kind of sitting there like, no, what are you going to do next? You could walk, you could do this. It doesn't have to constantly be me to do that. But the demand signal to not stop, I did not plan for on how the theme of that inspires people in so many different ways that they don't want to see that stop. And they want to tune into the story. They want to know the next thing. They want to know how they can help. We're in 2022. We thought it was a one and done. It was a great thing to do. And then after you rest a little bit for a month or that, and you're like, I put that on the back burner, then the internet takes over. The news comes in, the thing, and the demand signal. And the demand signal for this is a beautiful thing. It's the same thing. It's not a grandiose thing. It's people can see themselves in a way in this that has no political affiliation to it. It has no right, wrong, indifferent, nothing. It's just this good thing.
Well, I think that's I think where you hit the secret sauce. I mean, there's a lot, I think, to unpack in what you've said. But I think sort of the secret sauce of it is that this is a chance to engage in the stories, vice this sort of voyeuristic thing that a lot of documentaries or a lot of exposés or even advocacy groups tend to do, and no fault to them. It's just sort of what's baked into the formula is that we're headquartered out of somewhere. And even if I'm out of DC and I'm advocating for somebody in Albuquerque, New Mexico, all I'm going to get is sort of this drive-by version of what they've got going on so that I can then advocate for it wherever I'm headquartered. What you're doing is that you're immersing yourself in that thing just by the nature of the fact that you're walking it. You have no choice but to be in it for that time period that you're there. There's no, quite literally, no driving by and just sort of picking. I see what I did there.
Oh man!
So you're forced to be immersed in it, and so in that engagement, there is a reciprocity because you're taking in their story, you're sharing, and you're introducing them to an aspect of their life that they, like you're saying with this overseas highways, weren't even aware of, that they've just been driving by this whole time. And now they're like, oh, I have this whole new aspect of my life and my location and things that you've just opened up to me. And I'm so much more appreciative of advice. Like you said, I just need to get to this thing so I can party up as much as I can before I have to go back to my other life or my real life. I'm doing air quotes for the...
I also think that to since we're going with bad cliches, I think that people have a lot of immediate respect for somebody who does walk the walk.
There it is.
And
nice.
and in this case, you were, back with the bad cliche, walking the walk, and so it takes no time at all for that connection and for people to immediately respect what you're doing.
I think so. And I think a lot of people, regardless of where they come from or their health status or anything else, they can see a story, they can relate to. Everybody can, we all have the luxury. I try to refrain from saying everybody can walk because everybody can't walk. there are some people in life who just don't enjoy the luxury of being able to walk anymore. And it doesn't have to be a tragic circumstance. It can be just age. It can be anything else. They just can't do what they need. And I have found out that everybody empathizes with a person they see walking on the road because at one time they could do that or they could not do that. Or even if they could never do that, they envy the person that can actually walk and they can't. So they can make a connection and they understand the humidity. They understand everything else. And a lot of times they're looking like, why would someone do that? And they're not homeless.
That's
right?
such an interesting point because it's almost as if we've become so enamored with our own technology and it's so endemic in what we do that when you see someone walking, your first thought is, what happened to that person?
Yeah, like why would they do that?
Like, are they in trouble? What's wrong?
And then when you find out through engaging in conversation, it's quite the opposite. That fascinates people even more because then it makes them ask the why even more.
Yeah.
Because
you actually chose to do this.
Right, because in their head they're saying you have the financial resources, you have everything, you have a nice home, you have all this. Why? And they really want to get at the root element of the why. And I think there are certain things in life that there is no root element to a why because it's a multitude of things that come together that make that situation happen. And there's no one defining thing sometimes. I think in America especially, I think we always try to get at the purpose as fast as we can to cut through the chase, give me the bottom line up front. Why? Yeah. What put you on this thing to go out there? Did you lose your parent? Do you have an MIA? Do you have this? And when they can't put a finger on a single thing, it fascinates people even more to find out because then they want to try to tell you what your why is. I have found that too through conversations.
That's funny.
People who want to play like roadside psychologist or psychiatrist.
Really?
Like, well, since we can't define the why, let's try to ask a series of questions.
Here's a box I want to put you in.
Maybe we can get to the why because there's something that made you just do this. And I don't know if it's trauma, if it's whatever, and you're trying to tell them. There's none of that. There's none of that. I've got a friend. We've got some time. There's a good purpose. We can get out and walk. Luxury. There's a numerous connecting files that state we have the time, the purpose, the reason. We have things to do like that. If you can tie that into a greater thing, why wouldn't you? Right? To use and maximize that resources. But I do the same thing with my grandson, just walking through the park and wherever. There's no why to that other than I want to walk with my grandson.
Yeah.
Right? There's no get it the same why. The other thing is so epic compared to you just walking to a mailbox that I found out that the random person, it's more in their own head of they have to get answers to themselves rather than get you answers. They have to answer to themselves on why would somebody go and do that. There's got to be a why. And I like it that way because the funny thing is when they walk away from those conversations and there is no why, they don't forget it because they're constantly sitting at their own dinner tables and they're talking about, we met that guy today. That was boom, 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 boom. And because they can't reduce it to the lowest common denominator and now discount it rapidly, it stays in their head. And when that stays in their head, you stay in their head. When you stay in your head, the cause stays in their head. And then that way, it lives beyond what a physical presence can do. Yeah. That makes any sense.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. I do want to note, though, the irony of an Amtracker who's finding the zen of walking. This is fucking...
I think everybody.
Because that whole thing about the why, that's the exact reason why I became an Amtracker.
That's why we all made fun of...
I didn't want to ask the infantryman the why. Like, why would I do this when I can ride?
Oh, Kinzer gets it all the time from his infantry buddies. Like, you're absolutely... Didn't you get enough of this in the military? We hiked everywhere. Do you remember those conversations? Do you remember this? But this is different.
Yeah.
It was the same reason why when Brad and I just went out and did the Bataan Death March this last time, I've walked that a couple of times before, and I was in full military gear, and it sucked. I mean, there was a suck factor that I put on myself, that I'm not walking the original 1942, but in your own way, we're going to carry these packs. We're going to do this. And more importantly, there were like 9,000 people. I wanted them to see a U.S. Marine in uniform, because most people don't relate Marines to the Bataan Death March. They relate that's an Army thing. It was here. And a lot of the reason why we are Marines, and a lot of, like we say, the fluoride in the water of what makes Marines different, you can date right back to Marines on the Bataan Death March. And the stories of the Marines' survivability factor was higher than everybody else that was on the Bataan Death March. The service and sacrifice of Marines on the Bataan Death March, of placing themselves against the Japanese to protect inboard people so that they could make it there. There's rampant stories of Marines taking charge doing that. And survivability rate amongst Marines was skyrocketed. Now, Marines started losing their lives in the camps once they got over the years to do that. But on the original march, the survivability of those who were U.S. Marines was much greater than any English member. And that had to do with mental toughness, resiliency, and we're talking the early 1940s. Why we would not want to be teaching mental toughness, resiliency, and reinforcing in 2024 by showing our officers, NCOs, and everything, these are the people in the 1940s that had to endure this, and here's what they did. I find that to be just a completely wasted resource that's at everybody's fingertips, that we should be reinforcing what those men did in every service school that we have that is teaching resiliency, leadership, and all of that, because we're better. That's why we have a code of conduct. That's exactly why we have SEER schools. That's exactly why we prepare the next generation with the lessons learned of the previous generation. So if we're not telling the lesson learned of the previous generation, you want to talk cliche, we are doomed to repeat the previous bad lessons of the generation. And in today's day and age, with information at our fingertips, more than ever before, it's just plain laziness if this is not being reinforced across the U.S. military. It's an absence of malice. It's you're doing greater harm by taking these things that you can just do in a 5-minute hip pocket class on 2 jump seats at the end of the thing, that when the day is over and that individual goes and takes that phone and competes with the rest of the world for the intention. That's right. What they're also going to probably do is they're going to Google what their staff sergeant just told them on that jump seat, because it was intriguing. And once they do that, they're going to find that the staff sergeant greatly shortchanged the greatness of this freaking story. Because as they read it, they're going to be like, oh my God, this is epic.
Yeah.
These are epic things. And I found that you don't have to sit in an auditorium for 2 hours to plant that seed into individuals, that you can just do it in a simple conversation with 60 seconds walking around the Marine Corps anywhere, that has them walk into the chow hall at the Bruce Chow Hall over here, and there's 2 gigantic medals of honor on the doors. You can't drive through here without doing that.
Right.
I guarantee you 99% of the people in Quantico have no idea what those medals are, who that chow hall's named after, what Singleton Hall is named after. They don't stop and read the panels to do that. And it doesn't take a lot of money. It doesn't take a lot of time to just point to something and send somebody over there and say, hey, Corporal, today, I want you to go read that panel. I want you to come back and tell me what was on that panel. And then just do me one favor today, because we got a lot of shit going on. I just want you to tell that story to one other person today. That's it. That conversation took less than 30 seconds for them to go, come back, tell you they accomplished the mission. It's message to Garcia, right? You're reinforcing that. I did what you did. I brought it back. And then we're still going to work our butts off today, do the thing. We don't have time to stop and talk about this, but just do me a favor when you and I are done talking right now. By the end of today, just tell that story to one other person. Mission accomplished. Because now you've not kept it to yourself, you've just spread it. And now the burden is not on you to start doing everything. That then grows a little bit more and more. And before you know it, they're putting up pictures in their barracks rooms of, Jimmy Howard in 1968 and all these other things of motivational things that start to take on a life of its own. And you cannot tell me that every Marine out there did not come in the Marine Corps to want to do and immerse themselves in something like that. They did. They just don't know, they don't see it. And if they can't see, you see that thing all the time, that cliche, like you say, right? If you can see it, you can believe it or whatever. That's true. And that has nothing to just do with race. It's stories, actions, and small little snippets like you and I that grew up in mess halls that were not civilianized.
Right.
I mean, those were unit mess halls. And when you went in, the photographs of the units were on the tables underneath epoxy or whatever, and the history was all over the walls. And 20 or so years ago, we started to civilianize all this stuff and just say we want to give people a break and not have them so wired all the time that we're going to decorate it with surfboards or we're going to do this and we're going to give this thing. And you're sitting here going, that's not what they came in the Marine Corps to do. And if you would actually put these things in the chow halls again and the mess halls where they're sitting, you're sitting, you're eating, and you're reading, and you're doing this through osmosis. They're picking up their history because it may be a couple of years before you get to a corporal's course, a sergeant's course, to even get a little smattering of this. So the more that we could immerse Marines in that kind of stuff, it's a big win for everybody. And the Long Road has managed to spread that immersion and managed to expose. I'm not in a uniform anymore, but when the military is having recruiting problems, and they had it all on these walks the past 3 years, I didn't have any recruiting problems when I was out there explaining what the U.S. military does to people who can now ask me about it. And, the questions, would you put your son and daughter today? Well, that gives you 5 minutes to start talking through why they would ask you that question. And, oh, by the way, where did you get this information from? Do you have somebody in the military? Do you have somebody to do that? And you and I have talked before, and so have you and me, Nancy, of the greatest thing that the veterans have on their shoulders. You can either choose to be part of the solution or still part of the problem. And your word carries a lot of weight, especially if you wore the uniform of this nation. So you can either walk around your town spewing all kinds of toxic stuff. People are going to listen to that. And they're going to be like, well, God, you were in the military. And if you're telling people not to join the military, then, well, he's highly regarded. But we're going to take his word for it. Or you can be the one that's out there that gives them the pros and allows them to give the choices, prevent and make the same opportunities. And you know what? Don't believe my word. Go look at your options. Go talk to this guy. Don't listen to the internet. And you cut through that. You really do. And that ties into being able to spread that goodness other than just the POWMIA. That is probably one of the greatest reinforcing self-help things for veterans, is to be able to walk out there to spread a positive message and show people what the military has done and can do, and more importantly, what it has done for them, not just in fighting wars, building roads, doing the humanitarian kind of things at home that they were never exposed to, that now is going to open up their mind a little bit and allow those conversations to happen before they shut all of these doors. And I can't do all that. You can, and you can't. But we've got hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of veterans that are out there that could take that fluoride in the water.
Yeah.
And like we had just said in the barracks, you tell one person that day, and then you tell that person that day, now do me a favor. Go tell a couple of the good stories about when you were a Marine down there. Right? Rather than the country's all going to crap or anything else. It really is. And I found that the Long Road just reinforces that in spades to people.
That's awesome. What you guys are you? I know you just got back, and like we talked about, I mean, you missed the hurricanes by just a few days. So I mean, we're sort of getting into a season of walking probably isn't some of the best.
Yeah.
This is probably the greatest time unless you guys are going out on the West Coast. But have you thought about anything like maybe doing PCH or anything like that?
Yeah, we've talked about
Yeah.
numerous times. I mean, again, I've talked about doing the Camino and taking this international,
Oh, that would be awesome.
because we've actually
Wow.
got a large response via the internet, external from the United States. That are just as fascinated
Yeah.
in what is going on and love the same kind of message that can be applied in their own. They come walk across Ireland. Hey, if you ever get over here, we've got this road here. And the awesome thing is they've shown us different things that you never would have
Yeah.
seen, like Hadrian's Wall. You can walk Hadrian's Wall. You can walk this thing in the Nile. And you're like, that's awesome. I just never would have crossed my
Yeah.
mind that other people have broken down their countries into these kind of compartmental things too,
Sure.
that just don't get as much attention. But
Well,
they're
especially
there.
before, like, if you're just thinking about, periods of antiquity before there were these,
Mhm.
country lines and all this stuff. I mean, you imagine, obviously, I don't know if this is even possible, but like to do Hannibal's march,
Yeah.
into Rome or, I don't know. Yeah, you sort of name. I mean, Europe's probably full of Napoleonic stuff, or the Saxons in England, or
I mean, we do staff rides, right, Vic?
yeah, absolutely.
Nobody does staff walks.
Yeah,
We
do a staff walk.
rides.
That would be awesome.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, and those
Right.
are specific battlefields. But I mean, if you were to do the route, sort
And the
of
funny- and the-
Caesar in the Gaul or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when you can compartmentalize that, I mean, when you're talking, you're talking Saw, you're talking everything
Yeah,
else
yeah,
over here
yeah.
to do those. I mean, for Christ's sakes, that John A. Lejeune and Smedley Butler marched the Marines from here to Manassas
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
1920s
yeah.
And
to
Gettysburg.
recreate
They marched
Yeah.
to Gettysburg as
to
well.
recreate battles at that time with Marines, and they didn't truck them; they marched
Watch
them.
them, yeah.
Right, as part of the training to do that. So,
I've seen pictures of them as they were passing by the White
Yeah.
House, and people just came out to greet them along the way from.
and nothing in 2024 prevents people from doing that
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
Nothing.
So cool, so cool.
So just get off your butt and walk.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
I'm looking at, I'm
Come
looking
out
at
of
you,
pocket.
Vic.
Come out of pocket.
Yeah, come out of pocket.
Well, we had a few other things we want to
Sure.
talk about. I guess just mention them quickly because I know we're sort of come up on time. But like, speaking of sort of this history, this lineage of immersing ourselves in stories, we had talked on I guess it's upcoming episodes on our programming.
Yes.
But the Marine Corps Museum just a few weeks ago opened the OEF exhibit. Speaking of not being in uniform anymore, it's probably because your uniform is there from Najaf. I'm not from Nazaria. So again, what does that feel like? I know you've gone and visited the exhibit. What was that like for you to see? Not just recent Marine Corps history, but I mean yourself as a very integral part of that history. What was we did the media day, so it was probably only like 90% going. They hadn't started pumping in the smells yet and stuff. But
Yeah.
even for me, with my limited experience, it was still a very visceral sort of thing. I mean, what was like for you to be there, and what are your thoughts on the exhibit? And
I think one is very powerful.
Yeah.
Two, it's long overdue. I do believe I believe the intent and purpose of what the Marine Corps Museum did with that is to try to allow a piece of everyone to be able to see themselves. You can't put everybody's artifacts
Sure.
in a museum to do that. And what the museum did as well is they built different compartments this time that aren't in the earlier stages of the Marine Corps Museum. Let's just take something like John Ripley's uniform in the Vietnam exhibit, right? That cabinet was created specifically to display John Ripley's uniform and the magazine cover that has him crawling across the bridge at Dong Ha to reinforce before you get on the helicopter and get to the fire base. This is John Ripley's thing, right? there was never any intent ever for anybody else's uniform to swap out to go
Yeah.
inside of that. That is a Ripley thing that's there,
Yeah.
right? The newer galleries, I like the fact that they're larger, longer, and can be swapped out to tell, to continue these stories. Like people's artifacts can go on display for a couple of years.
Mhm.
Then that can be swapped out to change with this. So it's more fluid if you look like that. But I would have to tell you, it's one of the most surreal things I've ever seen in my life, because you still, no matter if you're immersed in it and that was your life, you still find it very hard to believe in a lot of ways that you had either done that, were a part of that, or more importantly is you were very honored that that uniform is so complete that tells a story.
Mhm.
And you're honored to be able to be the person that may be the catalyst that ties the story, that makes people pay attention to it. But you're really sitting there going, when anybody will see that, they will see I was there. And I don't mean I was there. They can come in with their children and go, I was in the invasion in 2003 too. And this was what we were wearing, and this was
Yeah.
that, right? And these are the different things. Like you see the vehicles moving through the periods of ghetto armor to Nor armor to all of this, and it makes progressively the story come to life. The sights, the sounds, the smells, the lifting up a flak jacket or something to see how hard, and that resonates with somebody who just passively heard their mother or father or saw a photograph of them wearing that kind of thing, and they don't have the luxury of having that flak jacket in their house anymore. They've
Right.
turned it in.
Yeah.
But when
Yeah.
they come and they lift that pack, or they lift a flak jacket, or they put something like that, and they instantly sit there and get a different level of respect for how did that work? How did you make that work? And it looks very archaic. I got the luxury of, I usually, Nancy knows how I roll. You know, I don't roll head to toe with a bunch of pins all over hats and everything else. I just kind of fly incognito. So it's pretty cool to be able to walk through a museum where no one knows really who
Yeah.
you are.
Yeah.
And you're able to kind of just stand in a corner and listen to people, and listen to them seeing a FARP site, or listen to them going through the interaction phase, because the one digital interaction phase that is in there that most people are unaware because they walk through it so fast is the scenario that shows you looking out windows and down an alleyway.
Yeah.
That scenario changes
Hmm.
and it loops constantly.
Yeah, it's like four different
You
entry
can sit
issues,
there for well over 10 to 15 minutes and not see the same thing twice. And most people have not picked up on that yet. They think it's just a 30-second clip of a certain thing and they kind of walk through. But it builds such a scenario of clear, hold, and build of how they cleared streets. The interaction between Marines running in and marking doors, that this room is clear, but 30 seconds later, the insurgents watched them do that, and they're coming in another thing, and they're scooting between here, and then there's the dogs, there's the smells, and there's that. So the micro things that are built into that, wherever you can look at, I think greatly represents the past 20 plus years of warfare, and then the ones even before that on post 9/11, to be able to walk around that corner and look up and see the Marines standing on the wall from Beirut looking down,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's three images that aren't just a poster. They're standing on top of the wall, and then you go, oh, that's a recreated photograph that shows the Marines after the Mount Barracks went down. And they're up there, right?
Yeah.
And then right around the corner, from snipers to 2001 to building every little smattering of an artillery piece, aviation, ground, and then even right down to individual stories that don't just relate or result in a medal.
Yeah. Yeah.
That warms my heart because that makes up the majority of everyone who has ever served in a uniform. So to be the person who is rare enough to be awarded something like that, I feel a great responsibility to have that tied into it, to be the connecting file, so to say, that people will show interest in that, and that connecting file makes them start to read everything else or to follow the rest of the story that leads to my mom was a truck driver, and this is what she ran convoys, and she did that. And I think the Marine Corps Museum did a great job of not using the politics of the day or the flavor in stories to influence what your storyboards are going to say, and really keep it to the collective story, absent of all that, of the U.S. Marine Corps.
Yeah.
I think one of the statements that was made when Vic and I did the media day tour is that their goal was to tell the story through artifacts or through objects, and I think they did a brilliant job.
Yeah, I mean,
of not politicizing it.
Yeah, I mean, cynicism's sort of my love language, right? And I make jokes when I get nervous. I didn't have a lot to say going through. It was unbelievably sobering. And it also was interesting to see, for me coming in, I think, 1997 was when I raised my right hand. And then retiring in 2018, almost the entirety of my military career is captured in that exhibit.
It is.
And it's fucking crazy.
I think one of the greatest things in there that people will just glance past, it isn't the combat, it isn't it isn't the Matt B that's blown up with everything, not taking anything away from any of that. To have the foresight to save an entire berthing area from the USS Shreveport is, to me, one of the most fascinating things of everyday Marine Corps life. Like you had said, Vic, that was my life prior to 9/11. That berthing area I stayed in more than my barracks room from 1988 up until the Twin Towers fell.
Yeah.
Growing up in the MOS, that was where you lived on Muse, and you stayed at sea. And they piped in. Most people don't know, they did not rebuild that. That is an actual berthing area that was completely cut out of the USS Shreveport and brought here and put in that museum.
That's crazy.
It is. It isn't just they got some racks from this ship.
Yeah,
or they got something. That is the regular. And then you look at the color of the floor. You look at the 1MC that's in there. You have the TV that's strapped and cargo hatched to the thing. That represents what a majority of the Marine Corps in post-Beirut, and even then, can say, I can see myself in that. If I was in the Marine Corps at that time, that was my life. Even if I was on an aircraft carrier launching that was my berthing area. Right. And I think people will probably pass it by pretty quick. It's just a berthing area or sleep. But the Marines who experienced it will immerse themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what all that's for. You're not supposed to understand everything. You're supposed to immerse yourself into the thing that you're supposed to understand the most. And that's what you connect to. The other parts of the Marine Corps are cool because they're the stories we grew up on, right? That's really the first generation of people that we all grew up around now that can now immerse themselves in their story and not just have to reflect on what life was like on Iwo Jima or the gravity of this.
Right, or Bellawood.
Bellawood. And those are not distracted. That is immersive to people who were there. And I've seen World War II veterans crying in that museum when they saw different things.
Sure.
The same thing is going to happen now. And that is the impact that a museum exists for.
Yeah, they had, and I never was like dismissive or thought it was jokey. But when you first told me about the respite room, my thought honestly was though, like, oh, how nice, that's a cool thing. But I didn't understand the impact of the exhibit and how necessary that area
Mm-hmm.
is. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, like, and I think it's so great too that here at the crossroads, where so many of the emerging generations are coming through to, and we've talked about this on other shows, that we're at a point again in the Marine Corps where we don't have the resident experience
Yes.
anymore. We're fucking gone. We're out to pasture. The dudes who were us under us.
Did you hear what he just said to you?
Yeah.
He said you're out
I
of
came
pasture.
out of
Absolutely.
pocket. I came out of pocket.
Thought it was a gigantic F-bomb he dropped from 32,000 feet, though.
But you don't have the company gunny who was the squad leader, 3 iterations ago. We don't have the battalion commander who was the, company XO, in these different battles. You get NCOs, you get junior officers. How many people have been in the combat zone and no one's raising their hand, no one's standing up?
Right.
If you don't have a ton of rockers or a ton of fucking shiny things, you probably don't have combat experience, or at least even being in a war zone experience. And so I think it's really great that this museum has done what they've done, because kind of along what we're talking with the long road too is that these aren't things you just drive by. This is your history now. This is your culture. This is what the Marines like. And it sounds so cliche, but you wear your uniform crisp, tighten your sleeves, blouse your boots, you're squared away, not only because you're afraid of getting your ass chewed, but because if you just go right across the street, catty corner, you'll see the sacrifice that people who aren't figments of mythology or of, people of legend. These are people who are sitting in these chairs that are living in this area, that are having anniversaries right now for the battle of, Second Battle of Fallujah. These people are alive. They're in, and when they were your age, they made these sacrifices, and this was their life, so that you could have this life. I don't know. I'm just kind of word vomiting right now, but it really was such a visceral experience for me to be in that exhibit, and it really helped me appreciate what I was a part of.
Yes.
Because now my life is, these 2 carbon footprints, and my beautiful, lovely wife, and the 3 dogs that just will lose their shit randomly. And so it's so immersive, right? But we were part of something that was a fucking like generational thing. Like, this was the fabric of our country, and we were part of it. That was the thing. Yeah.
Yep, and I think there's a demand signal now. Like you said, there's a drive to bring people back. You gotta refresh a museum every now and then, and I'm glad to see this happen for the Marine Corps Museum, because what they also don't know is, you're only seeing 10% of what's in a collection of a Marine Corps museum. You're also seeing they're constantly building things out there to better tell the stories. Not of just this. I was fascinated when I found on the internet, one of the other things, helping co-create and run the Amtrak Memorial that we're trying to build and do that, right, is I saw a news article just doing some research the other day, and I'm like, wait a minute. You have one of the first Roebling hurricane rescue vehicles in the Marine Corps collection. How have I never seen this? Or what? And then it's like, where did this go? I want to know now. I want to know now, because one, it can help tell stories. It can do that.
Where is it?
It's here.
Here.
Right? Because, once again, you don't see everything that's on display. We constantly have things in a period of refurbishment and metal work and everything else at our shop. And most people don't see those Marines in that are doing aircraft and Jeeps and this historical tank, and they got to rebuild the tread on it before it goes on.
Those are the unsung heroes of the museum.
They are. And the funny thing is, so I, out to Owen Connor and a few of the friends, and I'm like, is this real, or did we just get rid of this? He's like, it's off to paint right now. I'm like, so it is real. Like, I can come and touch that, like behind the scenes, like that being from the ones I'm from. That's you have the Holy Grail. Yeah. Not just the LBT-1. You have the precursor to what that made on the thing. And he's like, we've managed to do this. That's fine. And then he goes, and we're looking that possibly a couple of these things are going to be the centerpieces of the new displays that represent like the 1920s and the 30s of the interwar years.
Oh, that would be really
and
cool.
You're sitting here going, I know anybody's working on that. Because you can walk through the 1920s a little bit after Bella Wood and you see some things. And I told him, I said, it's interesting to me that the interwar years only has an airplane hanging from the roof and a couple of billboards on the side. It's like we kind of just glance through that.
Yeah.
We get to the thing. And I love the fact that, no, they're working on entire galleries to make the interwar years come alive that they will do, because there is still a lot more room that is not built into that museum. And that's not just to keep the door open for the future coming in. That's to enhance the stories that we already have.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes the Marine Corps Museum the premier museum in the nation.
Yeah.
It seems to do that more rapidly and more fluidly than a lot of other museums in America.
It definitely is kind of a living sort of building, a living place where there's constant change taking place.
Yeah, you can't go to it once a decade and still like, oh, I remember seeing this.
And I'm not partial because we're Marines, right, or biased that's on there, because I've helped other museums and to do different things from the Army. And
Yeah.
Unit museums in the Army are brilliant. Some of the Buffalo Soldier museums and all these other, Fort Riley, Kansas, and all this, the Big Red One, and you go to these immersive, like the 4th Infantry that I just went to in Fort Carson, they're really proud. Their little museum, they have that. The Marine Corps don't have little ones like that in units. So the reverence, like almost this holy reverence that Marines have for the National Museum of the Marine Corps, is completely different than all the other armed forces.
Right.
And they all have their own national museum. The Air Force in Dayton, we've got everybody else that's kind of around here, the Army. Brilliant museum that's up there, 500,000 square feet outside of Fort Belvoir.
Belvoir, yeah.
But when you talk to people, they just don't seem to have the same reverence for their museum systems that Marines do. And then you really look at, it's kind of the same thing with birthday balls, right? It's the same
with the history.
thing in the history. Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah. Well, Sergeant Major, unbelievable. Thank you again so much for being here.
Love it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we'll get you back on. I do want to have that conversation about sort of your experiences at TCOM fielding new and emerging systems. Because obviously we're on the cusp of fielding a ton, but one that's very close to home for both of us. I want to talk to you about ACV and what you're seeing and what your experiences were when you were Sergeant Major of TCOM and all that good stuff. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Vic.
And
Nancy, thanks a lot.
Oh, before you go, tell everybody where they can, where can people find you? Where can they learn how to donate to History Flight and support History Flight and Team Long Road?
Yeah, you can do two different websites, www.teamlongroad.com. And that's to follow on the long road journeys that are either in the past or upcoming. And then for the POW MIA search and recovery aspect, it's www.historyflight.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Sergeant Major. Well, we'll get the elevator queued up for you so you don't have to keep walking when you're around here.
I love it. Thanks, Vic.
The Marine Corps requires leaders of all ranks to have a deep understanding of war and the employment of force. MCDP 1 reminds Marines that the military profession is a thinking profession. Every Marine is expected to be a student of the art and science of war. It goes on to say that every Marine has an individual responsibility to study the profession of arms. Self-directed study in the art and science of war is at least equal in importance to maintaining physical condition and should receive at least equal time. The Marine Corps Association understands the critical importance of ensuring that Marines are as mentally ready for combat as they are physically ready. That is why we offer an entire page dedicated to wargaming on our website. We have recommendations for both tabletop board games as well as computer games. And for Marine Corps Association members, there is a discount code for War Game Design Studios that you can find on the website. War games are a great way to immerse yourself in history and to put yourself in the shoes of the great leaders of history. Go beyond guided instruction and experience the thrill of wargaming. Check us out at mca-marines.org/decision-making-exercises/wargaming-2. That's mca-marines.org/decision-making-exercises/wargaming-2. Take your training to the next level. Scuttlebutt is a production of the Marine Corps Association. You have heard the voices or contributions from Major Vic Rubel, USMC retired, Nancy Lichman, William Truding, and our guest. Ty Frazier is the editor, sound engineer, and technical producer. The Marine Corps Association is not an agency of the U.S. government. The opinions expressed in this episode are the personal views of the participants and do not reflect the official position of the United States Marine Corps, the Department of Defense, or the Marine Corps Association.